The
Don't you
fluorescent
dare
lights
lie
of
to me. You
Crystal
know
Falls
exactly what
Market
you did.
cast harsh shadows
That is
across
enough.
the
You need to
polished
calm
tile
down
floor.
right now.
A crowd has gathered near the organic produce section, phones out, recording. At the center of it all stands Margaret Whitmore, perfectly coiffed silver hair, Chanel sunglasses perched on her head, designer pantsuit that costs more than most people's monthly rent. Her face is flushed red with rage. I don't care what those cameras show. That child assaulted me. She's pointing a manicured finger at a small figure huddled against the end cap of cereal boxes. Marcus Washington, 8 years old, wearing a blue polo shirt and khakis, cradling his right hand against his chest. His face is streaked with tears. The store manager, David Chun, a thin man in his 40s with glasses sliding down his nose, holds up both hands in a placating gesture. "Ma'am, please, let's just calm down and wait for." "Calm down. Calm down. Do you know who I am? My husband sits on the board of this company. I shop here every week. And you're going to let some thug destroy my property and get away with it." Marcus's bottom lip trembles. His voice comes out small, broken. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted the cereal." Margaret whirls on him. "You shut your mouth. You don't speak unless you're spoken to." A security guard, Ramon Torres, shifts uncomfortably, trying to position himself between Margaret and the boy without escalating the situation further. "Ma'am, I need you to step back from the child." Margaret's laugh is sharp, bitter. "The child? The child? Where are his parents? What kind of people let their kids run wild in a store, destroying other people's belongings?" A woman in the crowd speaks up. "Lady, we all saw what happened. You need to stop." Margaret rounds on her. "You stay out of this. You're all going to lie for him." She pulls out her phone, her hands shaking with rage or adrenaline or both. "Fine, fine. When his father gets here, if he even has one, I'll have him arrested too for raising a thug." Marcus's sobs grow louder. His swollen right hand throbs with each heartbeat. The automatic doors slide open in the background. Someone's coming. The moment before, 45 minutes earlier, those same automatic doors had opened with a cheerful chime. Marcus walked beside his father, James Washington, his small hand tucked safely in his dad's larger one. James wore navy blue scrubs with a fleeced jacket over them, his hospital ID badge swinging from a lanyard around his neck. His face carried the gentle exhaustion of a 12-hour shift, but his eyes lit up when Marcus spoke. "Dad, can we get the ingredients for your famous stir-fry? The one with the cashews?" James smiled, that warm smile that made Marcus feel like everything in the world was exactly as it should be. "The famous stir-fry, huh? I don't know if it's famous, buddy. It's famous to me. Tommy said his mom's cooking is the best, but I told him he's never had your stir-fry." James laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence. Let's see what they've got." They grabbed a cart, and Marcus climbed onto the bottom rack for a ride. Something James usually discouraged but allowed today because the store was quiet, because his son's laughter was the best medicine after a long day of surgery. As they rolled past the bakery section, Marcus's eyes went wide. Dad, look. They have those cookies shaped like dinosaurs." James pretended to consider this with great seriousness. Do dinosaur cookies have any nutritional value that I, as a medical professional, should know about?" Marcus giggled. "They have, calcium. From being dinosaurs. Dinosaurs had strong bones. That is the most creative nutritional argument I've heard all week." "One package." "Yes." They made their way through the produce section, Marcus carefully selecting bell peppers in red, yellow, and orange because they looked like a rainbow. James watched his son with quiet pride, thinking about how far they'd come. The new house in Crystal Falls. The better school district. The tree-lined streets where kids rode bikes without worry. Everything he'd worked for. Everything he'd promised Simone before she died. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted. "Marcus, I need to take this." "It's the hospital." Marcus's face fell slightly. "Do you have to go back?" No. Just a call. But it might be important. Can you be my responsible young man for a few minutes?" Marcus straightened up, trying to look grown-up. "I can do that." James pointed to the cereal aisle 3 rows over. "I need you to stay right there in that aisle. Pick out one cereal. Not 2. Not 3. What do we say? 1 cereal. I promise. And what's the rule about strangers? Polite, but careful. Don't go anywhere with anyone. If someone makes me uncomfortable, find an employee with a name tag. That's my guy?" James ruffled Marcus's hair, and Marcus beamed up at him. Can I get the one with the toy rocket inside? The Mars Explorer one? If you promise to share the rocket with me, I might want to explore Mars too. Deal. James watched Marcus head toward the cereal aisle, his small figure navigating the store with careful attention. He pulled out his phone and headed toward the front entrance, already listening to his colleague's urgent voice explaining the incoming trauma case. Marcus stood in the cereal aisle, surrounded by colorful boxes promising prizes and adventures. He found the Mars Explorer cereal on the top shelf, the red rocket toy visible through the clear window in the package. His watch, the special watch his father had given him for his 8th birthday, a month early, caught the light. It was black with an orange band, a bit too large for his wrist, but Marcus wore it with pride. He remembered what his father had said when he'd presented it. This isn't just a watch, buddy. It has a camera, GPS, and an emergency button. If you ever feel unsafe, you press this button and I'll know exactly where you are and what's happening. Marcus had hugged his father tight. Like a superhero watch? James had smiled. Exactly like a superhero watch. Now, Marcus reached up for the cereal box, stretching on his tiptoes. He was so focused on not dropping it that he didn't notice the shopping cart positioned slightly behind him. His elbow bumped the cart. It rolled about 6 inches and tapped against another cart. The sound of metal on metal was soft, barely audible, but it was enough. Backstory section. Marcus's heart jumped as he spun around. The cereal box clutched to his chest. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see. The woman standing beside the second cart turned slowly. She wore the kind of outfit Marcus associated with the fancy ladies in his dad's medical magazines. Cream-colored pants without a single wrinkle, a silk blouse in pale pink, pearls at her throat. Her handbag sat in the child seat of her cart, a glossy brown leather thing with gold hardware that gleamed under the store lights. Margaret Whitmore's eyes traveled from her bag to the cart to Marcus, and something in her expression shifted. Hardened. What do you think you're doing? Marcus felt his stomach drop. He knew that tone. It was the same tone Mrs. Henderson had used at his old school when she'd accused him of cheating on a test, even though he'd studied for hours. The tone that said he was guilty before he'd even opened his mouth. I'm really sorry, ma'am. I was reaching for cereal, and I accidentally bumped your cart. I didn't mean to. Is everything okay? He tried to use his most polite voice, the one his father had coached him on, the one that was supposed to keep situations from getting worse. Margaret snatched up her purse, examining it with the intensity of a jeweler inspecting a diamond. Do you have any idea how much this costs? Marcus shook his head, clutching his cereal tighter. No, ma'am. But I didn't hurt it, I promise. The cart barely touched. Don't tell me what happened. I know what I felt. She was turning the bag over in her hands, her perfectly manicured nails catching every angle in the light. Where are your parents? You shouldn't be running wild in here. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. He wasn't running wild. He was doing exactly what his father had asked him to do. My dad's right outside, ma'am. He's a doctor, and he got a call from the hospital, so I'm just... Oh, I'm sure he is. The words dripped with sarcasm so thick that even Marcus, at 8 years old, couldn't miss it. He felt something twist in his chest. That feeling he got sometimes when people looked at him and his dad in their new neighborhood. When they'd gone house hunting, and the realtor had asked if they were sure they could afford the area. When the woman at the country club had asked if James was there to fix something. My dad really is a doctor. He's a pediatric cardiac surgeon at Crystal Falls Medical Center. We just moved here and... Margaret held up a hand. I don't need your life story. I need a manager. Now. She pulled her phone from her purse with sharp, angry movements. Marcus felt panic rising in his throat. He hadn't done anything wrong. Had he? Maybe he shouldn't have been reaching for the cereal. Maybe he should have waited for his dad. Maybe. No. He could hear his father's voice in his head, from a conversation they'd had just last week. They'd been unpacking boxes in their new house. Marcus's room slowly coming together with posters of the solar system and a bookshelf his dad had built by hand. Marcus had asked the question that had been weighing on him since they'd started looking at houses in Crystal Falls. Dad, why did we leave our old neighborhood? I liked it there. My friends were there. James had sat down on the edge of Marcus's race car bed, the same bed Marcus had slept in since he was 4. Come here, buddy. Marcus had climbed up beside him. You know how I'm always telling you about working hard? About studying and being your best self? Marcus nodded. I do that because I want you to have opportunities. I want you to go to great schools, meet people from all different backgrounds, have experiences I didn't get to have when I was growing up. But the kids at my old school were nice. I know they were. And you'll make new friends here too. But this district has better science programs, better resources, a library that's open until 8, soccer teams and art classes and all the things you love. Marcus had considered this. Is it because we're the only black family on our street now? James had taken a breath, choosing his words carefully. Not the only reason. But, Marcus, I'm not going to lie to you. Some people are going to look at us and make assumptions. Some people are going to think we don't belong in a neighborhood like this, in a house like this. That's not fair. No, it's not. But here's what I need you to understand. We do belong here. I worked my way through college, through medical school, through residency where I barely slept for years. I did that so you could have the life your mother and I always dreamed of for you. James had pulled Marcus close. Some people might not like that we're here, but that's their problem, not ours. We don't have to prove anything to anyone. We just have to be ourselves. Be kind, be honest, work hard, and know our worth. What if people are mean? Then you stay calm, tell the truth, and remember who you are. You're Marcus James Washington. You're brilliant, kind, and you belong anywhere you choose to be. Marcus had hugged his father tight. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. More than all the stars in space. Now, standing in the cereal aisle with Margaret Whitmore looking at him like he was something dirty she'd stepped in, Marcus tried to remember that conversation. Tried to hold on to his father's words. But it was getting harder. The manager arrived, speed walking down the aisle with concern etched on his face. Ma'am, is everything all right? Margaret gestured dramatically at Marcus. This child damaged my property. He ran his card into mine, and when I confronted him, he became belligerent. Marcus's eyes went wide. That's not true. I said I was sorry. I didn't run anything. I just bumped it by accident when I was getting cereal. David looked between them, clearly trying to assess the situation. Okay, let's everyone take a breath. Ma'am, is there visible damage to your bag? Margaret thrust it toward him. Look at this scuff. Right here. This bag is Hermes. It cost $15,000. David examined the bag carefully, turning it over in his hands. His eyes scanned every surface, every seam. Ma'am, I'm not seeing any damage. The bag appears to be in perfect condition. Margaret snatched it back. Are you calling me a liar? No, ma'am. I'm just saying that I don't see what you're... So you're taking his side? A child you don't even know over a loyal customer? David held up both hands. I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm just trying to understand what happened. Son, what's your name? Marcus Washington. And are you here with a parent? Yes, sir. My dad. He's right outside on a phone call. He's a doctor at... Margaret cut him off with a bitter laugh. Oh, we've established that fairy tale already. Marcus felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. He blinked hard, trying to keep them back. His father always said that tears were okay, that emotions were human, but right now Marcus felt like crying would somehow prove Margaret right. Would somehow make him look guilty. Sir, can I please just go find my dad? He started to turn toward the front of the store. You stay right there. Margaret's voice cracked like a whip. Marcus froze. David stepped forward. Ma'am, if he wants to get his father, that's probably the best. He's not going anywhere until this is resolved. For all I know, he'll run out of the store and I'll never see justice. Justice for what? Marcus wanted to scream. For what? His hand moved unconsciously to his watch. His father had shown him how to activate the camera with a double tap of the button. James could see what was happening. James would know what to do. But something stopped Marcus. Some instinct that activating it would make things worse. Would make it look like he was doing something sneaky. So he kept his hand still, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. David tried again, his voice patient but firm. Ma'am, I really think we should. Don't tell me what to think. I want this documented. I want evidence. I want... She paused, her eyes narrowing as she looked at something past Marcus's shoulder. The security cameras. Where are your security cameras? David gestured vaguely upward. We have cameras throughout the store. Yes. Then pull the footage. Right now? I want everyone to see exactly what this child did. David hesitated. Ma'am, that would require me to go to my office, and I don't think I should leave. Then call another manager. Call security. Just do it. Marcus watched as David pulled out his radio, speaking in low tones. Within minutes, another employee arrived, a younger woman named Jessica who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. Ramon, the security guard, arrived shortly after. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a daughter about Marcus's age at home. What seems to be the problem here? Margaret launched into her version of events, each retelling growing more dramatic. The gentle bump of the cart had become a violent collision. Marcus's polite apology had become hostile backtalk. His attempt to retrieve his cereal had become a threatening gesture. Marcus listened to her twist the truth and felt something breaking inside him. This was what his father had warned him about. This was the moment where it didn't matter what actually happened. It only mattered what someone with power claimed had happened. Ramon looked at Marcus with sympathy. "Son, is that what occurred?" Marcus's voice came out smaller than he wanted. "No, sir. I accidentally bumped the cart when I was reaching for cereal. I apologized right away. I didn't damage anything. I just want to get my dad." Margaret threw up her hands. "See, he's lying. Right to your face." A few other shoppers had started to gather, drawn by the commotion. Marcus could feel their eyes on him, could hear their whispered conversations. "That poor kid. She's being ridiculous. Someone should call the parents." But also, what did he do? Kids these days have no respect. Where are his parents? Marcus wanted to disappear, wanted to melt into the floor, wanted to wake up from this nightmare back in his bed with his dad making pancakes downstairs. Instead, he stood frozen in the cereal aisle of Crystal Falls Market, clutching a box of Mars Explorer cereal, trying to remember that he belonged here, trying to believe it. Ramon spoke gently to Marcus. "Son, are you here alone?" Marcus shook his head quickly. "No, sir. My dad is right outside. He's on a call from the hospital. He told me to stay in this aisle and pick one cereal. That's all I was doing." He held up the box as evidence of his innocence. Ramon nodded slowly, then turned to David. "Can we call the father?" David looked at Marcus. "Do you know your dad's number?" Marcus recited it from memory. James had drilled it into him the same way he drilled in their home address, the hospital's address, and 911. David pulled out his phone and dialed. It rang, and went to voicemail. "He's probably still on his call," Marcus said, voice shaking. "He said it might be important. A patient." Margaret seized on this. How convenient. A father who's nowhere to be found, and a child running wild. This is exactly the problem with. She caught herself, but not before several people in the growing crowd stiffened. Ramon's jaw tightened slightly. "Ma'am, let's keep this focused on the specific incident." "Fine. The specific incident is that child damaged my property, and when confronted, became aggressive." "I didn't." Marcus's voice cracked. "I said I was sorry. I was trying to be polite." "Polite? You wouldn't even look me in the eye. My dad taught me not to stare at adults. That it's disrespectful. Well, your father clearly didn't teach you not to destroy other people's things." Marcus felt the tears coming now, hot and unstoppable. "I didn't destroy anything." His voice echoed through the store. Several shoppers pulled out their phones. In 2024, everyone was a documentarian. Everyone was ready to capture the next viral moment. Margaret saw the phones and seemed to make a calculation. She modulated her voice, made it shakier, more victimized. "I'm being attacked. A child assaults me, damages my property, and now I'm the villain because I'm defending myself?" A woman in the crowd spoke up, her voice sharp. "Lady, we all just got here, but from what I'm seeing, you're a grown woman screaming at a crying 8-year-old. Read the room." Margaret whirled on her. "You don't know what happened. You didn't see. Then I guess we'll wait for the cameras to tell the truth, won't we?" Margaret's confidence flickered. Just for a second. But Marcus saw it. She wasn't as sure as she was pretending to be. David's radio crackled. He stepped away, speaking in low tones, then returned. "The footage is being pulled now. It'll take about 10 minutes. 10 minutes felt like an eternity to Marcus. 10 minutes standing here, being stared at, being accused. His hand moved to his watch again. This time, he didn't stop himself. He double-tapped the button. The camera activated silently. A tiny red light appeared on the watch face, so small that you'd have to know to look for it. James had explained it to him during their training session. "If you ever activate this, buddy, I'll get an alert on my phone. I'll be able to see what you're seeing and hear what you're hearing. It's for emergencies only. Do you understand?" Marcus had nodded seriously. Emergencies only. Now, standing in the cereal aisle with his hand throbbing from being squeezed too tight and his heart racing with fear, Marcus figured this qualified. The watch began recording everything. Every word, every gesture, every moment of what was about to unfold. David tried to restore some order to the chaos. "Okay, everyone, Let's just wait calmly for the footage. In the meantime, no. Margaret's voice cut through his attempt at peace. In the meantime, I want this child restrained. Ramon's eyebrows shot up. Ma'am, he's 8 years old. He's not going anywhere. How do you know? Look at him. He's clearly getting ready to run. Marcus hadn't moved. He stood exactly where he'd been for the last 5 minutes, cereal box still clutched against his chest like a shield. Ma'am, David said carefully, I don't think that's necessary. What's your name? Margaret demanded. I want to speak to your supervisor. I want corporate's number. My name is David Chun. I'm the store manager. I am the supervisor on duty. Then you should know better than to let criminals run wild in your store. The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Criminal. He was 8 years old. He'd never even had a detention at school. The worst thing he'd ever done was accidentally break his dad's favorite coffee mug, and he'd confessed immediately, crying, offering to give up his allowance to replace it. Criminal. A woman in the crowd gasped. Are you serious right now? He's a child. Margaret didn't back down. Age doesn't excuse behavior. My grandson is 9, and he knows better than to touch other people's property. Your grandson probably doesn't get screamed at in grocery stores for existing, someone muttered. Margaret heard it. Excuse me. Ramon stepped between Margaret and the crowd, his arms spread in a peaceful gesture. Folks, I need everyone to calm down. We're going to review the footage, get everyone's statements, and handle this appropriately. Appropriately? Margaret's voice dripped with disdain. Appropriately would be calling the police. For a bumped shopping cart? David asked, incredulous. For assault and property damage. There is no property damage. David was losing his patience now. I've examined your bag 3 times. It's perfect, because I moved it before he could do more damage. The logic was circular, insane. Marcus wanted to scream, wanted to throw the cereal box down and run to find his father. But he remembered James's words. Stay calm. Tell the truth. Know your worth. So he stood there, silent, while Margaret spun her web of accusations. Jessica, the young employee, knelt down beside Marcus, her voice gentle. Honey, are you okay? Are you hurt? Marcus shook his head, but his bottom lip was trembling. I just want my dad. I know, sweetie. We're trying to reach him. She pulled out her own phone and tried the number David had dialed. Again, it went to voicemail. Outside, James was still deep in conversation with Dr. Patricia Lynn, the trauma surgeon explaining the incoming case. A 14-year-old with a congenital heart defect, presenting with acute symptoms. They needed James's expertise. Lives were on the line. His phone was in his hand, but he was so focused on the medical details that he didn't notice the notification that popped up on his screen. Marcus, emergency watch activated. The alert was there, waiting. But James's eyes were on his colleague's lips, reading the urgency in her expression. Just 2 more minutes, and he would have seen it. 2 more minutes, and everything would have been different. Back inside, Margaret was escalating. I'm a loyal customer. I've shopped here for 15 years. And this is how you treat me? By protecting something. She gestured at Marcus, searching for words that wouldn't cross the line she was dancing on. Some child who clearly has no supervision? He has supervision, David said. His father is literally right outside. Then where is he? What kind of father leaves a child this age alone in a store? The kind who's a doctor saving lives. The shout came from the crowd. A young black woman, maybe in her 20s, holding a baby on her hip. Her eyes were fierce. Maybe the kind who actually trusts his kid to follow instructions for 5 minutes while he handles an emergency. Maybe the kind who taught his son manners and respect, which is clearly more than your parents managed. Margaret's face went purple. How dare you? You don't know anything about me. We know enough, lady. We've all been watching you scream at a crying child for the last 10 minutes. We've got eyes. Other voices joined in. She's right. This is ridiculous. Leave the kid alone. Margaret looked around, realizing she was losing the crowd. And in that moment of clarity, she made a decision. She would double down. Fine. Fine. You all want to defend him? Then you can all be witnesses when the police arrive. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Ramon stepped forward. Ma'am, I don't think calling the police is. I don't care what you think. She was dialing 911. Marcus felt ice water flood his veins. The police. His dad had talked to him about police. The conversation every black parent has to have with their child. The talk that white parents couldn't understand the necessity of. If you're ever stopped by police, be polite. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements. Say yes, sir, and no, sir. Don't talk back. Don't argue. Just comply and stay calm, and I'll fix it later. But his dad had also said, the police should be people you trust. People who help. I just need you to be extra careful because not everyone sees you the way I see you. Marcus understood now. Margaret was calling the police on him. 8 years old, holding a cereal box, with tears streaming down his face. And she was calling the police. 911, what's your emergency? Margaret's voice shifted, became breathy, frightened. Yes, I need police immediately. I'm at Crystal Falls Market on Riverside Drive. I've been assaulted. Ma'am, are you injured? Do you need medical assistance? No, but I need police here now. The person who assaulted me is still here. Can you describe the person? Margaret's eyes locked on Marcus. It's a child, but he's violent, aggressive. I tried to protect my property, and he became threatening. The crowd erupted. That's a lie. She's lying. We have video. Margaret turned away from them, cupping her hand over the phone. Please, send someone quickly. I don't feel safe. Officers are on their way, ma'am. Can you stay on the line? Yes. Yes, I'll stay right here. She lowered the phone, but didn't hang up. Her eyes found Marcus again. You're going to learn a very important lesson today about respecting your elders. Marcus couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears came in earnest now, his small body shaking with sobs. I didn't do anything. Why are you lying? Don't you raise your voice at me. You hit me. Marcus held up his right hand, which was visibly swollen now. You grabbed my arm and you hit my hand, and it hurts. The crowd went silent. Ramon's head snapped toward Margaret. Ma'am, did you put your hands on this child? Margaret's eyes widened, realizing her mistake. He was reaching for my bag. I was defending my property. It's my legal right. David stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. Ma'am, you struck a child? I tapped his hand away from my belongings. Let me see, Ramon said to Marcus, his voice gentle. Marcus held out his hand, and Ramon examined it carefully. The knuckles were red, starting to purple. There was clear swelling across the back of his hand. This needs ice, Ramon said. Jessica, can you get a first aid kit and an ice pack? Jessica nodded and hurried off. David pulled out his phone and took several photos of Marcus's hand. What are you doing? Margaret demanded. Documenting evidence, David said flatly. If you struck a child, that's assault. I was defending myself. From an 8-year-old? Age doesn't matter. Size doesn't matter. He was threatening me. A man in the crowd laughed, bitter and disbelieving. That little boy is threatening to you? Really? Margaret whirled on him. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what it's like to be a woman alone, vulnerable. You're in a grocery store surrounded by people, a woman shot back. And the only person who hurt anyone here is you. Margaret's phone was still connected to 911. The dispatcher's tinny voice emerged. Ma'am? Ma'am, are you still there? Margaret lifted the phone. Yes. Yes, I'm here. Please, how much longer until the police arrive? They're about 5 minutes out. Can you describe the situation now? There's a mob forming. People are threatening me. I'm scared. Several people in the crowd pulled out their phones, recording this too. Lady, no one's threatening you, someone called. We're just not letting you lie about what happened. Margaret ignored them. Please hurry. She hung up. The store felt smaller suddenly. The air thicker. Everyone was waiting for something to happen, for some authority to arrive and decide who was telling the truth. Marcus wiped his eyes with his left hand, trying to stop crying. His right hand throbbed. Jessica returned with a first aid kit and a blue ice pack. She knelt beside Marcus. Here, sweetie, put this on your hand. It'll help with the swelling. Marcus took it with a quiet thank you, his voice hiccuping with leftover sobs. David tried calling James again. Voicemail again. Son, do you know where your father is exactly? What or did he go out? The front doors. The ones we came in. Ramon spoke into his radio. Torres to front entrance. We need someone to locate an adult male in scrubs, about 6 feet, African-American, probably on a phone call. Name is Dr. James Washington. Tell him his son needs him immediately. Copy that. But the front of the store was busy, and the employee who went looking was young, uncertain. He scanned the parking lot, saw several people on phones, none of whom matched the description perfectly in the fading evening light. He radioed back. I don't see anyone matching that description. Marcus heard this through Ramon's radio. He's there. He's right there. He wouldn't leave me. I know, buddy, Ramon said. We're going to find him. But doubt was creeping in. Marcus could see it in the way some people in the crowd exchanged glances. Could hear it in their whispered conversations. Where I asked the dad. Seems weird he'd leave a kid this young alone. Maybe there's more to the story. No, 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 no. Marcus knew what was happening. He'd heard his dad talk about it with other black parents. How credibility could shift in an instant. How one planted seed of doubt could grow into a forest of suspicion. My dad didn't leave me. He's just outside. He told me exactly where to stay and what to do, and I did it. His voice was desperate now, pleading. Margaret saw the opening. A child this young, left alone, clearly no supervision. It's neglect. That's what it is. Child neglect. That's not neglect. The young woman with the baby shouted. That's a father trusting his well-behaved kid for a few minutes. Well-behaved children don't assault strangers. He didn't assault anyone. The shouting was getting louder. The crowd was splitting into factions. Most were on Marcus's side, but a very few, were starting to question. David raised his voice. Everyone, please. The footage is almost ready. Let's just wait for facts before we make any more accusations. But the damage was done. The doubt was there. And in the parking lot, James was finally ending his call with Dr. Lin, finally glancing at his phone screen, finally seeing the alert. Marcus, emergency watch activated. 15 minutes ago. His heart stopped. 1 week earlier, James had stood in Marcus's new bedroom, holding a small black box. The house was still full of unpacked boxes, walls still bare, but Marcus's room was the priority. James had made sure of that. A child needed their space to feel safe, to feel at home. Marcus sat on his new bed. They'd splurged on a bigger one, a full-size, because Marcus was growing so fast, and watched his father with curious eyes. I have something for you, James said. An early birthday present. Marcus's eyes lit up. But my birthday isn't for a month. I know. But this is special. This is important. He handed Marcus the box. Marcus opened it carefully, revealing the watch. His eyes went wide. Dad, this is like a spy watch. James smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. It's a safety watch. Let me show you how it works. He sat beside Marcus and took the watch, demonstrating each feature. This button here, if you press it twice quickly, it activates a camera and GPS. The camera records everything you can see and hear. The GPS tells me exactly where you are. And I get an alert on my phone immediately. Why would I need that? James took a breath. This was the conversation he'd been dreading. The one Simone would have known how to handle better. She'd always had a way of explaining hard truths without stealing childhood innocence. But Simone was gone, and James had to do this alone. Marcus, this neighborhood is different from our old one. Because we're the only black family on our street? James nodded slowly. That's part of it. But it's not just that. When you look different from most people around you, sometimes people make assumptions about who you are, what you're like, whether you belong. That's stupid. James laughed softly. Yeah, buddy. It is stupid. But it's also real. He took Marcus's hand, looking at the watch on his small wrist. Most of the time, you're going to be fine. You're going to make friends, go to a great school, have adventures. This watch is just insurance. It's just in case. Do you understand? Marcus nodded seriously. In case someone is mean to me? In case someone is mean to you, and you need proof of what really happened? In case someone says you did something you didn't do? In case you need help and can't reach me by phone? James's voice cracked slightly. I promised your mother I would always keep you safe. This is part of how I do that. Marcus threw his arms around his father's neck. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. More than all the stars in space. James held his boy tight, breathing in the scent of his coconut shampoo, feeling his small heartbeat against his chest. When they pulled apart, James continued the tutorial. The watch also has a regular camera, a calculator, a timer, all the normal stuff. But the emergency function is the most important. You understand when to use it? Marcus nodded. If I'm scared or hurt or someone's doing something wrong. Exactly. But Marcus? This isn't a toy. This is serious. We don't activate it for fun or games. Only real emergencies. Can you promise me that? Marcus held up his pinky. Pinky promise. They locked pinkies, and James felt some of the anxiety ease from his chest. One more thing, James said. In this neighborhood, you might meet people who don't expect to see kids who look like us living here. Some of them might say things or act in ways that seem unfair. What should I do? Stay calm. Be polite. Tell the truth. And remember who you are. You're brilliant. You're kind. You're loved. You belong anywhere you choose to be, even if they don't think I belong. Especially then. James ruffled Marcus's hair. But also call me. Always call me. If something feels wrong, if someone makes you uncomfortable, you find a safe place and you call me. Or you use the watch. I will always come for you. Always. Do you understand? Marcus nodded, eyes serious beyond his years. I understand, Dad. They'd practiced with the watch after that. Practiced the double tap to activate. Practice speaking clearly so the audio would record well. Practice staying calm. James had hoped they'd never need to use it. Had prayed it was just overprotective parenting. Had wanted to be wrong about the world. Now, as he stared at his phone screen in the parking lot of Crystal Falls Market, he realized all his fears had been too accurate. His son had needed it. And James had missed the alert for 15 minutes. He ran. James burst through the entrance of Crystal Falls Market like a man possessed. His eyes scanned frantically, and he followed the sound of raised voices toward the cereal aisle. What he saw made his blood run cold. His son, small and scared, holding an ice pack to his hand, surrounded by a crowd of strangers. A security guard standing nearby, a store manager on his phone, and a well-dressed white woman gesturing dramatically while speaking to someone. Marcus. James's voice cut through the chaos. Marcus's head snapped up, and his face crumpled. Daddy. James was across the store in seconds, dropping to his knees in front of his son, his hands immediately going to Marcus's face, his shoulders, checking for injuries. Are you okay? Are you hurt? What happened? His eyes found the ice pack. Let me see your hand, buddy. Marcus held it out, and James's jaw clenched as he saw the swelling, the beginning of bruises. Who did this? His voice was controlled, but there was steel underneath. The voice of a man who'd spent years in emergency rooms, who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer, who'd learned to channel rage into focused action. David stepped forward. Dr. Washington? I'm David Chun, the store manager. I've been trying to call you. James held up a hand without looking at him, his focus entirely on Marcus. Marcus, look at me. Tell me what happened. The lady. Marcus's voice was small, broken. I bumped her cart by accident when I was getting cereal. I said I was sorry. She got really mad. She grabbed my arm and hit my hand when I tried to pick up my cereal. James closed his eyes for a brief moment, and when he opened them, something had shifted. He stood slowly, turning to face the crowd. Where is she? Margaret had been trying to back away, to blend into the dispersing crowd, but now all eyes turned to her. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. Are you the father? Her voice had a tremor in it, but she was trying to maintain authority. James's eyes locked on hers, and Margaret felt something in her stomach drop, because she recognized him. She recognized him from 3 months ago, from the longest night of her life, from the hospital waiting room where she'd sobbed into her daughter's shoulder while a surgeon worked to save her grandson's life. She recognized the eyes that had looked at her with compassion and confidence when he'd emerged from the OR, still in his surgical gown, to tell her that Garrett was going to be okay. Dr. Washington? Her voice was barely a whisper. James's expression didn't change. Do I know you? Margaret's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. David looked between them, confused. You two know each other? James kept his eyes on Margaret. I asked you a question. Do I know you? Margaret found her voice, though it shook. You operated on my grandson. 3 months ago. Garrett Whitmore. The crowd went silent, everyone sensing the shift in the air. James's face was carved from stone. Garrett Whitmore. 8 years old. Congenital heart defect. Tetralogy of Fallot with pulmonary atresia. Yes. Emergency surgery. 14 hours in the OR. High risk of mortality. Margaret nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. You saved his life. James took one step toward her, and Margaret instinctively took one step back. I held your daughter's hand. Do you remember that? When you were both sobbing in the waiting room, terrified you'd lose him. Margaret nodded, unable to speak. I told you I would do everything in my power to save your grandson. That I would treat him like he was my own son. Do you remember that? Yes. And did I? Yes. Margaret's voice broke. Yes, you did. You saved him. You're a hero. We're so grateful. James's voice cut through her gratitude like a scalpel. Then explain to me why you put your hands on MY's son. The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret's tears spilled over. I didn't know. I didn't realize. You didn't know what? James's voice rose slightly, the control starting to crack. You didn't know he was MY's son? Would it have mattered if he was someone else's son? Would it be acceptable to assault a child as long as he wasn't connected to someone you know? No. No, that's not. I didn't mean. What did you mean? James was advancing now, not threatening, but his presence was powerful. Marcus had never seen his father like this, controlled fury radiating from every pore. My 8-year-old son accidentally bumped a shopping cart. He apologized. And you decided that warranted grabbing him and striking him? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, I see a grown woman who attacked a child and then called the police on him to cover her own assault. Margaret was crying openly now. I was scared. I thought. I didn't know. You thought what? James's voice was louder now, the rage breaking through. Say it. Say what you thought about my son when you saw him standing there alone. Say what made you so scared of an 8-year-old boy that you felt justified in hitting him. Margaret shook her head, sobbing. James turned to the crowd. Anyone? Can anyone here tell me what about my son is so threatening? Is it his age? His size? His polite apologies? His tears? He turned back to Margaret. Or is it something else? Something you don't want to say out loud? Dr. Washington, David tried to interject. Maybe we should. No. James whirled on him. No, we shouldn't. Because this is what happens every single day. Black children being treated like criminals for existing. Being punished for mistakes white children make without consequence. Being hurt and then blamed for their own assault. His voice carried through the entire store now. People were recording on their phones, capturing every word. James pointed at Margaret. This woman saved my information. She sent me a Christmas card with Garrett's picture. She knows me. She trusts me with her family's lives. But she saw my son, alone, and saw a threat instead of a child. Because I wasn't there to make him acceptable, to make him worthy of basic human decency. Dr. Washington, please, Margaret choked out. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I'll do anything. You'll do anything? James's laugh was bitter. You'll do anything now. After you've been caught. After you've been exposed. After you realized you attacked the son of the man who saved your grandson. He knelt back down beside Marcus, his voice softening. But my son will carry this forever. This memory of being hurt and not believed. Of being called a criminal at 8 years old. Of learning that apologies and politeness and truth don't always matter if you have the wrong skin color. He looked back up at Margaret, and his eyes were wet now too. So no, there's nothing you can do. The damage is done. The sound of sirens cut through the tension. 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. Margaret's face went even paler. James stood, keeping one hand on Marcus's shoulder. Officers entered the store. Officer Brooks, a white man in his 40s with a military bearing, and Officer Martinez, a Latino woman in her 30s with sharp, observant eyes. Who called 911? Brooks asked. Margaret raised a shaking hand. I did. What's the emergency, ma'am? Margaret looked around at the hostile crowd, at James's cold expression, at Marcus's tear-stained face. I thought. She couldn't form the words. Officer Martinez's eyes scanned the scene, taking in every detail. The child with the ice pack. The tall man in scrubs beside him. The store manager's sympathetic expression. The crowd's protective stance around the father and son. Brooks tried again. Ma'am, the 911 call indicated an assault. Can you explain what happened? Before Margaret could answer, David stepped forward. Officers, I'm David Chun, the store manager. I think there's been a significant misunderstanding. We have security footage if you'd like to review it. Martinez's eyebrows rose. That might be helpful. James spoke, his voice measured. My name is Dr. James Washington. This is my son, Marcus. I'd like to report an assault. Brooks's attention shifted to him. You're reporting an assault? Yes. This woman struck my 8-year-old son. He held up Marcus's hand, showing the swelling, the bruising. Martinez knelt down beside Marcus, her voice gentle. Hi, sweetheart. I'm Officer Martinez. Can you tell me what happened? Marcus looked up at his father, who nodded encouragingly. I was getting cereal. I accidentally bumped a cart, and it touched her cart. I said sorry. She got really mad and said I hurt her purse. I tried to say sorry again, but she kept yelling. Then she grabbed my arm and hit my hand when I tried to pick up my cereal. His voice was steadier now, his father's presence giving him strength. Martinez examined his hand carefully, her expression darkening. That's quite a bit of swelling. Did anyone see what happened? Multiple voices from the crowd. I did. We all saw. She hit him. A teenage girl stepped forward, her phone in hand. I recorded some of it. Want to see? Martinez nodded, and the girl played the video. It showed Margaret yelling, showed Marcus crying, showed the moment of the strike. Brooks watched the video, his expression neutral but his jaw tight. He looked at Margaret. Ma'am, did you strike this child? Margaret was shaking violently now. I was defending myself, my property. From an 8-year-old? He was. I thought. Brooks's tone sharpened. You thought what, ma'am? Margaret broke down completely. I don't know. I don't know what I thought. I made a terrible mistake. James spoke again. Officers, she also made false statements to 911. She claimed my son assaulted her and was being aggressive. The footage will show that's untrue. Martinez stood, exchanging a look with Brooks. We'd like to see that security footage now. 6 hours earlier, James had been in operating room 3 at Crystal Falls Medical Center, his hands steady as he repaired a valve in a 6-year-old's heart. His team moved around him with practiced precision, nurses anticipating his needs, the anesthesiologist monitoring vitals, the perfusionist managing the heart-lung machine. Suction. The instrument appeared in his hand before he finished speaking. The surgery was complex, delicate. One wrong move could be catastrophic. But James's mind was calm, focused. This was where he felt most at peace. In the OR, everything made sense. Skill, knowledge, and effort produced predictable results. If only the rest of the world worked that way. The surgery was successful. The child's heart, once weak and failing, now beat strong and steady. In the locker room after, James changed out of his surgical scrubs and into fresh ones. He was exhausted but satisfied. Another life saved. Another family who wouldn't have to plan a funeral. Dr. Chun, one of his colleagues, entered the locker room. Nice work in there, James. That repair was textbook. Thanks, Patricia. How's your day been? Long. We had a car accident victim come in this morning. Touch and go for a while, but he's stable now. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. So, Patricia said, how's the new neighborhood treating you and Marcus? James paused, considering his answer. It's an adjustment. Patricia, who was Asian American and had her own experiences with being the other in predominantly white spaces, gave him a knowing look. What happened? James smiled wryly. Am I that transparent? To someone who's been there? Yeah. James rubbed his face. Last week, I went into a store near our house. I was in scrubs, had my hospital badge visible. Security followed me the entire time. When I went to check out, the cashier asked if I could afford the items in my cart. Patricia winced. Wow. I showed her my ID, explained I was a cardiac surgeon. She got flustered, apologized. But the damage was done, you know? Marcus was with me. He saw the whole thing. How'd you explain it to him? I told him the truth. That some people make assumptions. That we have to work twice as hard to get half the credit. That his skin color would be the first thing some people see, not his character or intelligence. Patricia shook her head. It's 2024. You'd think we'd be past this. You'd think. Another colleague, Dr. Marcus Williams, a black man in his 50s who'd been at Crystal Falls Medical for 20 years, entered the locker room. You two look serious. What did I miss? James was just telling me about his welcome to the neighborhood. Williams snorted. Let me guess. Followed in stores. Surprised you can afford your house. Police calls about a suspicious person in your own driveway? James's eyes widened. The driveway thing happened to you? Twice. My own neighbor called the cops on me. Twice. I've lived there for 15 years. What happened? First time, I explained calmly, showed ID, they left. Second time, I was less patient. Told them they were harassing me. Filed a complaint. That neighbor doesn't make eye contact anymore. Williams sat down heavily. You know what the worst part is? I'm at the top of my field. I've published papers, won awards, saved countless lives. And none of it matters when someone decides I'm a threat based on my skin color. James nodded, feeling the weight of those words. I just want Marcus to have better. To not have to deal with this. Williams gave him a sad smile. We all want that, James. Every black parent wants that. But wanting it and getting it are two different things. Patricia spoke up. For what it's worth, the medical community here is strong. We've got your back. Both of you. James appreciated the sentiment, even if he knew it had limits. Supportive colleagues couldn't protect Marcus in a grocery store. Couldn't shield him from assumptions and prejudice. Couldn't guarantee his safety in a world that often saw black children as threats instead of treasures. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A reminder about Marcus's parent-teacher conference next week. I should get going. Promised Marcus we'd cook dinner together tonight. What's on the menu? Patricia asked. His famous stir-fry, apparently, though I'm not sure when it became famous. When you made it for the hospital potluck last year, Williams said. That was legitimately delicious. James laughed. Well, if it impressed you, maybe it is famous. As he gathered his things, Williams called out. James, be careful out there. Crystal Falls is nice on the surface, but just be careful. James nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. Always am. Now, in the store manager's office, watching security footage of his son being assaulted, James understood why Williams had warned him. Crystal Falls was beautiful, pristine, perfect, until it wasn't. David's office was cramped with so many people inside. James, Marcus, the two officers, David, Ramon, and Margaret all crowded around the monitor. David queued up the footage, starting from when James and Marcus had entered the store. The video showed them shopping together, laughing, Marcus riding on the cart. It showed James taking the phone call and pointing Marcus toward the cereal aisle. It showed James going outside. Then it showed Marcus, alone, carefully examining cereals. The moment of the cart bump was clear. Gentle, accidental, barely moving Margaret's cart an inch. Marcus's immediate apology was visible, his body language open, apologetic. Margaret's reaction was disproportionate from the start. Her aggressive posture, her pointing finger, her aggressive steps toward Marcus. The audio was faint but discernible. Margaret's voice. What do you think you're doing? Marcus. I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean. Margaret. Where are your parents? You shouldn't be running wild in here. Brooks and Martinez watched in silence, their expressions growing harder with each passing second. The footage continued. Showed Margaret calling for the manager. Showed Marcus trying to explain his increasing distress. Showed Margaret blocking his path when he tried to leave. Then came the moment. Marcus reaching for the fallen cereal box. Margaret snatching it away. Marcus. That's mine. My dad said I could. Margaret grabbing Marcus's wrist, Marcus pulling back, and then the slap. Crystal clear. Undeniable. Marcus's cry of pain. His hand immediately going to cradle the injury. His tears. And Margaret's face, shocked at her own action, but then hardening into defensiveness. The video continued, showing her doubling down, calling 911, making false claims about being attacked. When it ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Martinez spoke first. Ma'am, you told 911 that you were assaulted and that the child was being aggressive. That's clearly not what happened here. Margaret was crying again, her expensive makeup running down her face. I panicked. I thought. You thought what? Brooks asked, his voice hard. Because what I see on this footage is a child apologizing and a woman escalating a non-incident into assault and battery. Please, Margaret whispered. Please, I made a mistake. Can't this be settled privately? She looked desperately at James. Dr. Washington, I'll pay for any medical expenses. I'll donate to any charity you want. Please, think of Garrett. He asks about you all the time. You're his hero. James's voice was ice. Then maybe you should think about what kind of example you're setting for your grandson. What you're teaching him about how to treat people who look different from him. Margaret flinched as if she'd been struck. Officer Martinez turned to James. Dr. Washington, do you want to press charges? James looked down at Marcus, who was leaning against him, exhausted from the emotional ordeal. Yes, I want to press charges for assault on a minor, false reporting, and I want this investigated as a possible hate crime. Margaret gasped. Hate crime? No, I'm not. I'm not racist. Then why did you assume my son was a threat? James asked quietly. Why did you doubt his truth? Why did you think it was acceptable to put your hands on him? Margaret had no answer. Brooks pulled out his handcuffs. Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault on a minor and filing a false police report. No, please. Margaret's voice rose to a wail. You can't do this. I know the police chief. I know the mayor. Martinez's voice was firm. Then I'm sure they'll be very interested in seeing this footage, ma'am. You can't arrest me. I'm the victim. The evidence suggests otherwise. Brooks began to recite Miranda rights as he guided Margaret's hands behind her back. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Margaret looked around wildly, seeking anyone who would help her. This is ridiculous. You're ruining my life over a misunderstanding. James spoke, his voice cutting through her protests. You tried to ruin my son's life over the color of his skin. You don't get to play victim now. The handcuffs clicked into place. As Brooks began to lead Margaret toward the door, James remembered something. Officers, wait. There's more evidence. Both officers paused. What kind of evidence? James knelt down beside Marcus. Buddy, did you activate your watch? Marcus nodded, his eyes wide. When things got really scary. When she was yelling about calling the police. James felt his heart clench. His son had been so frightened he'd activated the emergency function, and James hadn't seen the alert in time. Can I see it? Marcus held out his wrist. The small red light was still blinking, indicating the camera was still recording. James pressed the button sequence to stop the recording and sync it to his phone. What is that? Martinez asked. It's a safety watch. It has a camera and GPS. Marcus activated it during the incident. You have video? Brooks looked stunned. Audio and video. From Marcus's perspective, David quickly helped James connect his phone to the office monitor. The file took a moment to load, and then it began to play. The footage was from a child's height, looking up at the adults around him. The audio was crystal clear. What they heard made everyone in the room feel sick. Margaret's voice, dripping with contempt. Oh, I'm sure he is. When Marcus mentioned his father was a doctor. Margaret, where are your parents? You shouldn't be running wild in here. Marcus, my dad's right outside, ma'am. He's a doctor, and Margaret, I'm sure he is. Dripping sarcasm. Later, he probably doesn't even have one. Referring to Marcus having a father. Marcus's small, frightened voice. I just want my dad. Margaret, you're not going anywhere. The physical grab was audible. Marcus's gasp of pain. Margaret's harsh grip. Marcus, you're hurting me. Margaret, you stay right there. Then the slap, the sound of it echoing through the speakers. Marcus's sob. Why are you doing this? I said I was sorry. The audio captured Margaret's 911 call too. Her false claims of being attacked. Her description of Marcus as aggressive and threatening. When the footage ended, Martinez's hands were clenched into fists. Brooks looked at Margaret with open disgust. Margaret had gone completely white. That watch footage, Brooks said slowly, captures multiple offenses. Assault on a minor. False reporting. Child endangerment. And the language used. It establishes bias, Martinez finished. Pattern of discriminatory behavior. James's voice was quiet but firm. My son is 8 years old. He weighs 60 pounds. He was following instructions, being polite, and telling the truth. And this woman saw him as a threat worthy of violence and police intervention. I want to know why. Margaret tried to speak. I didn't mean the things I said. They weren't. Weren't what? James demanded. Weren't racist? Then what were they? Explain to me how you look at a crying child and see a criminal. Explain how you hear him talk about his father and assume he's lying. Explain it. Margaret couldn't. She just sobbed. Brooks guided her more firmly toward the door. Ma'am, we're taking you to the station now. You'll be booked and processed. Do you have an attorney you'd like to contact? Margaret didn't answer, her mind seemingly unable to process what was happening. As they let her out, she passed James and Marcus one more time. Dr. Washington, she whispered. Please. I'm so sorry. Think of my family. Think of Garrett. James's expression didn't change. I am thinking of your family, Mrs. Whitmore. I'm thinking about what lessons Garrett is learning from you. I'm thinking about whether he'll grow up to treat other children the way you treated mine. I'm thinking about breaking that cycle. Margaret was led away, her sobs echoing through the store. After the police left with Margaret, the crowd began to disperse. But several people approached James and Marcus first. The young black woman with the baby came forward, tears in her eyes. Dr. Washington, I just want you to know, thank you. For standing up. For not backing down. For showing that boy how to fight for justice. James managed a small smile. Thank you for speaking up earlier. It mattered. An elderly white man, probably in his 70s, approached next. I'm ashamed, he said quietly. I shop here every week. I've seen that woman treat the staff terribly before. I never said anything. I should have. I'm sorry you and your son had to go through this. James nodded, accepting the apology. The teenager who'd recorded video on her phone stepped forward. Sir? I posted the video on my TikTok. It's already got like 50,000 views. People are really mad about what happened. Is that okay? James considered this. Did you post my son's face? No, sir. I kept it on her. I wouldn't do that to a kid. Then yes, it's okay. Thank you for documenting the truth. One by one, people came forward, offered support, shared their own stories of bias and discrimination, promised to be better witnesses in the future. David approached last. Dr. Washington, I cannot apologize enough for what happened in my store. This should never have occurred. You didn't cause it, James said. But I do want to know what policies you have in place to prevent this in the future. David nodded seriously. I'll be implementing mandatory bias training for all staff, installing more visible cameras with audio, creating clear protocols for situations involving children. And I'll be personally reviewing this incident with corporate to see what systemic changes we can make. I appreciate that. And, David added, you and your family have a standing 20% discount here. For life. James almost laughed. We don't need charity, Mr. Chun. It's not charity. It's accountability. And it's the least I can do. James accepted with a handshake. Ramon, the security guard, knelt down beside Marcus. Hey, champ. You did really good today. You stayed calm, told the truth, and stood up for yourself. That takes courage. Marcus managed a small smile. My dad taught me. Ramon looked up at James. You raised a good kid, Doc. I know, James said, his hand on Marcus's shoulder. I really do. As the crowd finally cleared, James knelt down in front of Marcus, taking both his hands gently. How are you feeling, buddy? Tired. My hand hurts. And I'm hungry. James laughed, the sound releasing some of the tension he'd been holding. Well, we can fix at least two of those things. Let's get you checked out by a doctor, not me, and then we'll get dinner. Can we still make stir-fry? James pulled Marcus into a hug. We can make whatever you want, son. Whatever you want. As they stood to leave, Marcus looked up at his father. Dad, did I do something wrong? To make her so mad? James felt his heart break a little. No, Marcus. You did everything right. Everything. What she did was about her, not you. Do you understand? I think so. Marcus paused. Dad, will it happen again? James wanted to lie. Wanted to promise that it wouldn't. But he'd promised to always tell Marcus the truth. It might, buddy. I hope it won't, but it might. That's why we prepare. That's why you have the watch. That's why we talk about these things. But we'll always fight back, right? Like today? Always, James promised. Always. They walked toward the exit, Marcus's small hand in James's larger one, the same way they'd entered. But everything had changed. By the time James and Marcus got home that evening, the videos had exploded across social media. The teenager's TikTok had millions of views. The footage from the store's security cameras had been leaked and was circulating on Twitter. The watch footage, which James had authorized the release of, was being shared on every platform imaginable. Hashtag Justice for Marcus was trending nationally. News outlets were picking up the story. James's phone was ringing nonstop, reporters requesting interviews, colleagues offering support, advocacy organizations wanting to get involved. He silenced his phone and focused on Marcus. They'd stopped at urgent care on the way home. Marcus's hand had been x-rayed. No fractures, just deep bruising and soft tissue damage. He'd been given a brace to wear for a few days and prescribed anti-inflammatory medication. Now they sat in their kitchen, James making grilled cheese sandwiches instead of stir-fry because it was late and they were both exhausted. Marcus sat at the table, his braced hand resting on a pillow, scrolling through his tablet. He was looking at messages from his classmates, most of whom had seen the videos. Dad, everyone at school is talking about it. What are they saying? That I was brave. That the lady was mean. That you were like a superhero when you showed up. James smiled despite himself. I just stood up for my son. That's what parents are supposed to do. Tommy's mom said his dad would never do that. He'd just be mad at Tommy. James felt a flash of anger at Tommy's father, whoever he was. Well, I'm not mad at you. I'm proud of you. Even though I used the watch and you didn't see the alert, James set down the spatula and came to sit beside Marcus. Especially because you used the watch. That's exactly what it's for. You did everything right, Marcus. Everything. I was scared. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are scared. Marcus absorbed this. Dad, why did she hate me? James took a breath, choosing his words carefully. I don't think she hated you, buddy. I think she was scared of you. And her fear made her do terrible things. But why would she be scared of me? Because she's been taught, probably her whole life, to see people who look like us as dangerous, as other, as less than. It's not true, and it's not fair, but it's what she learned. Can she unlearn it? James considered this. Maybe. I hope so. For her grandson's sake, I hope so. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Marcus asked the question James had been dreading. Dad, will I be safe at my new school? James pulled Marcus close. I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. I will advocate for you, stand up for you, and make sure you're protected. But Marcus, I can't promise that you'll never face this again. Marcus nodded against his father's chest. I know, but what I can promise is that you'll never face it alone. I will always believe you, always support you, always fight for you. Promise? Promise. They stayed like that until the grilled cheese started to burn, the smoke alarm beeping until James jumped up to rescue dinner. They ate their slightly charred sandwiches, and Marcus managed to laugh at his father's cooking mishap. Later, as James tucked Marcus into bed, Marcus looked up at him with serious eyes. Dad, I still like our new house. Yeah? Yeah, and I still want to stay here. I don't want her to win. James felt pride swell in his chest. That's my boy. But Dad? Yes? Can I sleep in your bed tonight? Just tonight? James smiled. Just tonight. Marcus grabbed his favorite stuffed dinosaur, and they made their way to James's room. Marcus curled up on Simone's side of the bed, the side James still couldn't bring himself to sleep on. As Marcus drifted off, James stayed awake, scrolling through his phone. The videos had reached an even wider audience. Legal experts were weighing in. Child psychologists were discussing the impact of racial bias on children. Activists were using the incident to push for reform. And then James saw it. A statement from Margaret's attorney, posted on Twitter. Mrs. Whitmore deeply regrets the incident at Crystal Falls Market. She is seeking counseling and bias training. She asks for privacy as her family processes this difficult time. James felt his jaw clench. Privacy. His 8-year-old son hadn't been granted privacy when he was assaulted in public. But now the perpetrator wanted it. He put the phone down and looked at Marcus, sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. Tomorrow, they would face the aftermath. The news coverage, the statements, the legal proceedings. But tonight, they would rest. Together. Safe. The story had taken on a life of its own. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, every major outlet had covered it. James had declined most interview requests, wanting to protect Marcus's privacy. But he'd agreed to one interview with a local journalist known for fair, thoughtful reporting. The interview took place in their living room, Marcus at school, James in a button-down shirt and slacks. The journalist, Keisha Williams, was a black woman in her 40s who'd covered civil rights issues for 2 decades. Dr. Washington, thank you for speaking with me. Thank you for the opportunity to tell our story accurately. Let's start with the basics. What happened that day from your perspective? James recounted the events calmly, clinically almost. But when he got to the part about seeing Marcus's injured hand, his voice cracked. I've held countless children's hands in my career. I've repaired hearts, saved lives, comforted families. But seeing my own son's hand swollen and bruised from an adult's violence, that's a sight I'll never forget. What went through your mind in that moment? Rage. Pure rage. But also clarity. I knew that if I reacted with anger, if I became the angry black man, it would be used against us. Against Marcus. So I had to channel that rage into seeking justice through the system. And do you think the system will deliver justice? James paused. I think the evidence is overwhelming. The security footage, the watch recording, the witness statements, they all tell the same story. But I've lived long enough to know that evidence doesn't always equal justice, especially when race is involved. Margaret Whitmore's attorney has suggested this was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. What's your response to that? A misunderstanding is when someone accidentally bumps into you and you both apologize. This was an adult woman who saw a black child, assumed the worst, assaulted him, and then attempted to weaponize the police against him. That's not a misunderstanding. That's racism in action. Some people have criticized you for pressing charges, saying it will ruin Mrs. Whitmore's life. James's expression hardened. Mrs. Whitmore made choices. She chose to put her hands on my son. She chose to call the police with false accusations. She chose to escalate a nothing incident into a traumatic event. I'm not ruining her life. I'm holding her accountable for the choices she made. What do you want to come from this? I want my son to know that his truth matters. That he doesn't have to accept being treated as less than because of his skin color. And I want other children to be protected from this kind of bias and violence. If that means making an example of this case, so be it. How is Marcus doing? He has nightmares. He's more clingy than usual. He's scared to go into stores alone now. An 8-year-old should be thinking about toys and games, not whether a stranger might hurt him for existing. So no, he's not okay. But he's resilient. We're working through it together. What would you say to Mrs. Whitmore if she were here right now? James was quiet for a long moment. I'd say that the boy whose life I saved, her grandson Garrett, is watching this, learning from this. And she has a choice now about what lessons she teaches him. She can teach him that accountability is something to fear, or she can teach him that real change requires acknowledging harm and doing better. I hope she chooses wisely. The interview would air that evening and be viewed by over 2 million people. The preliminary hearing took place in a courtroom that was packed with observers, media, and activists. Margaret sat at the defense table with her attorney, Richard Blackwell, a silver-haired man known for defending high-profile clients. She wore a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. The transformation from the Chanel-clad woman in the store was deliberate, her attorney's attempt to make her look sympathetic. James sat in the gallery with Marcus beside him. Marcus had wanted to come, wanted to see the process. James had been hesitant, but ultimately agreed, believing his son had a right to witness justice being pursued. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Carmen Rodriguez, was a fierce advocate known for taking on difficult cases. She approached this one with the gravity it deserved. Judge Patricia Hamilton, a black woman in her early 60s with a reputation for fairness and no-nonsense proceedings, presided. The hearing was to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Blackwell stood to make his opening statement. Your Honor, this case represents a rush to judgment fueled by social media outrage rather than facts. My client, Mrs. Margaret Whitmore, is a respected member of this community. She made an error in judgment during a stressful moment, but her actions do not rise to the level of criminal assault or hate crime. Judge Hamilton looked unimpressed. Counselor, that's an argument for trial or sentencing, not a preliminary hearing. We're here to determine if probable cause exists. Of course, Your Honor. I simply wanted to establish context. Context noted. Ms. Rodriguez? Carmen Rodriguez stood, commanding the room. Your Honor, the evidence in this case is overwhelming and disturbing. We have multiple video recordings, witness testimony, and medical documentation showing that the defendant struck an 8-year-old child without provocation, then filed a false police report to cover her actions. The pattern of bias evident in her recorded statements meets the threshold for hate crime enhancement. Let's see the evidence. Rodriguez played the security footage first. The courtroom watched in silence as Marcus bumped the cart, apologized, and was subsequently berated and struck. Several observers gasped at the moment of impact. Then came the watch footage. Margaret's voice, full of contempt and assumption, filled the courtroom. When the footage showed her grabbing Marcus and striking him, several people in the gallery shook their heads in disgust. Blackwell tried to object. Your Honor, this footage lacks proper chain of custody. Judge Hamilton held up her hand. Counselor, this is a preliminary hearing, not a trial. The standard for admissibility is lower. I'll allow it. The medical records were entered next. Photos of Marcus's hand, the urgent care report, the diagnosis of soft tissue trauma. Witness statements followed. David Chin testified via written statement about what he'd observed. Ramon Torres did the same. Multiple shoppers provided accounts consistent with the video evidence. Finally, Rodriguez called her one live witness, James Washington. James took the stand, was sworn in, and recounted the events. Blackwell cross-examined. Dr. Washington, isn't it true that you left your 8-year-old son unsupervised in a public place? James's voice was calm. I stepped outside to take an emergency call from the hospital regarding a patient. My son was in a safe location, given clear instructions, and equipped with safety technology. He was supervised insofar as I could monitor his location and well-being remotely. Some might say that's negligent. Some might say that black parents have to make impossible choices about trust and safety every day. I trusted my son to follow instructions. He did. The failure wasn't in my parenting. It was in an adult who chose violence over compassion. Judge Hamilton interrupted. Counselor, unless you're suggesting that leaving a child alone for a few minutes justifies assault, I'd recommend moving on. Blackwell changed tactics. Dr. Washington, you treated Mrs. Whitmore's grandson. You know her family. Don't you think this could be resolved outside the criminal justice system? James looked directly at Margaret for the first time. I saved her grandson's life because that's what doctors do. We save lives regardless of who people are or what they've done. But saving a life doesn't buy her the right to harm mine. My son deserves justice just as much as Garrett deserved medical care. The courtroom was silent. After testimony concluded, Judge Hamilton took only 15 minutes to deliberate. Having reviewed the evidence presented, I find there is more than sufficient probable cause to proceed to trial on all charges. Assault on a minor in the third degree, filing a false police report, and I am allowing the hate crime enhancement to proceed based on the pattern of bias evident in the defendant's statements. Blackwell stood. Your Honor, we request bail be set reasonably. Given that the defendant has significant financial resources and possible flight risk, bail is set at $100,000. She is also ordered to stay at least 500 feet from the victim and his family at all times. Margaret's face crumpled. Your Honor, please. Judge Hamilton's gaze was stern. Mrs. Whitmore, you struck a child. You then attempted to use law enforcement as a weapon against that child. You are fortunate that bail is being offered at all. Next outburst, and I'll reconsider. The gavel came down. As they left the courtroom, reporters swarmed. James shielded Marcus, pushing through the crowd. One reporter managed to get a microphone close. Dr. Washington, are you satisfied with the judge's ruling? Justice hasn't been served yet, but we're one step closer. In the days following the hearing, the community response intensified. A protest was organized outside Crystal Falls Market. Hundreds of people showed up, many holding signs. Protect Black children. Marcus matters. Accountability now. We see you. We believe you. Community organizers gave speeches. Local pastors led prayers. Parents shared their own stories of bias and discrimination their children had faced. James and Marcus attended, though James kept them at the edge of the crowd, not wanting Marcus to become a spectacle. A young organizer, Tyrell Johnson, spoke passionately. Marcus Washington is every Black child in America. He's our sons, our brothers, our students. He was taught to be polite, to follow rules, to trust the system. And the system failed him. A woman saw his Blackness before his humanity, and she reacted with violence. The crowd roared in agreement. But here's what's different about this case. Marcus had a father who believed him, who had resources to fight, who had evidence that couldn't be denied. How many Black children don't have that? How many have been hurt, arrested, traumatized, and had no one to advocate for them? Tyrell pointed toward James and Marcus. We're not just fighting for Marcus. We're fighting for every child who doesn't have video evidence. Every child whose truth gets dismissed. Every child who learns too young that their life doesn't matter as much as others. The applause was thunderous. Later, a community meeting was held at a local church. Parents came to discuss how to protect their children, how to advocate effectively, how to demand change. James was asked to speak. He'd prepared remarks but found himself going off script. When I became a father, I knew I'd face challenges. Medical school was hard. Residency was brutal. But nothing prepared me for the fear of sending my Black son into a world that might see him as a threat before seeing him as a treasure. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the crowd. I've taught Marcus about racism since he could understand language. I've given him tools, taught him strategies, tried to prepare him. But no amount of preparation can fully protect him from someone else's hate. James's voice broke slightly. What happened to Marcus happens to countless children every day. In schools, in stores, in parks, in their own neighborhoods. And most of the time, there's no camera, no evidence. Just a child's word against an adult's assumptions. A woman in the crowd stood. What can we do? How do we protect our babies? James took a breath. We document. We advocate. We support each other. We demand accountability. We don't accept that this is just how things are. And we teach our children that they are worthy, valuable, and deserving of dignity, regardless of what the world sometimes tells them. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Parents shared strategies. Teaching children to activate recording devices when they feel unsafe. Role-playing scenarios about interactions with authority. Creating networks of supportive parents who could respond quickly to incidents. Advocating for bias training in schools and businesses. Pushing for policy changes that protect children. By the end, there was a sense of purpose, of collective action, but also a sense of sadness that these preparations were necessary at all. While James and Marcus were navigating their new reality, Margaret was facing her own reckoning. She sat in her lawyer's office, Richard Blackwell looking at her with barely concealed frustration. "Margaret, we need to discuss the plea offer." Margaret's hands were shaking. "What are they offering?" "Assault in the third degree, file false report. Recommended sentence, 6 months suspended, 2 years probation, 200 hours community service, mandatory bias training, restitution for medical costs." That's criminal record. I'll be a convicted criminal. You struck a child. What did you expect?" Margaret started crying. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean any of it. I panicked." Blackwell leaned back in his chair. "Let me be blunt, Margaret. If this goes to trial, the jury is going to see those videos. They're going to hear you question whether a black child has a father. They're going to see you grab and hit an 8-year-old. And with the current social climate, there's a very real possibility you'll be convicted on all counts, including the hate crime enhancement." Hate crime. The words made Margaret feel sick. "I'm not a racist. The evidence suggests otherwise. I'm not. I have black friends. I voted for Obama." Blackwell held up a hand. "Those statements will not help you. In fact, please never say them again, especially not in court." Margaret buried her face in her hands. Her daughter, Rebecca, Garrett's mother, had barely spoken to her in a week. Her husband was sleeping in the guest room. Her friends had distanced themselves. She'd been asked to step down from 2 charity boards. Her whole life was unraveling. And the worst part? She couldn't even say they were wrong. She'd watched the videos, watched herself transform from a woman shopping for groceries into someone she didn't recognize. Someone cruel, someone frightening. The look on Marcus's face haunted her dreams. She kept thinking about Garrett, about how he'd bounced back from his surgery, how he talked about Dr. Washington like he was a superhero, how he'd drawn pictures of the doctor who saved his life. She thought about telling Garrett what she'd done to Dr. Washington's son. She couldn't imagine it. Blackwell's voice cut through her thoughts. "Margaret, you need to make a decision. Take the plea, which gives you a chance at redemption and rehabilitation. Or go to trial, where you'll likely face harsher consequences and more public humiliation. What about apologizing? Really apologizing? To whom? To Marcus? To Dr. Washington?" Blackwell considered this. An apology could be part of a restorative justice approach, but it would need to be genuine. And it would need to be on their terms, not yours. You don't get to demand forgiveness. I know that. Do you? Because so far, your response has been focused on how this affects you. Your reputation. Your life. Your embarrassment. That's not accountability. That's self-pity. The words hit Margaret like a slap. She thought about her grandmother, who'd used slurs at the dinner table and told Margaret that those people were different. She thought about her parents, who'd chosen their neighborhood carefully to ensure the right kind of people lived there. She thought about her own assumptions, her own fears, her own biases that she'd never examined because they were comfortable. She thought about the moment in the store when she'd looked at Marcus and seen a threat instead of a child. And she realized Blackwell was right. She hadn't been scared of Marcus. She'd been scared of what his presence meant, that neighborhoods were changing, that her comfortable world was shifting, that she could no longer make assumptions about who belonged where. And that fear had turned to violence. "I'll take the plea," she said quietly. "And the bias training? All of it. Whatever they require. Because you want to avoid jail time?" Margaret looked up at her lawyer. "Because I don't want to be the person I was in that store ever again." It was the first completely honest thing she'd said in weeks. 3 months after the incident, the courtroom was packed again for Margaret's sentencing hearing. She'd taken the plea deal, pleading guilty to assault in the 3rd degree and filing a false police report. The hate crime enhancement had been dropped as part of the agreement, much to the disappointment of many activists. But the prosecution had pushed for the maximum allowable sentence under the plea agreement, and today, Judge Hamilton would decide Margaret's fate. Margaret sat at the defense table, looking smaller somehow. She'd lost weight. Her expensive clothes hung looser. Her face was drawn, aged. James and Marcus sat in the front row of the gallery. Marcus had insisted on coming, wanting to see the process through. Judge Hamilton called the court to order. "We're here for sentencing in the matter of the state versus Margaret Whitmore. Ms. Rodriguez, does the prosecution wish to make a statement?" Carmen Rodriguez stood. "Yes, Your Honor. The state recommends the maximum sentence allowed under the plea agreement. The defendant's actions traumatized a child, endangered his safety, and demonstrated a pattern of racial bias that cannot be ignored. While we appreciate the defendant's guilty plea, We believe strong consequences are necessary both for accountability and deterrence. Mr. Blackwell? Richard Blackwell stood, looking more subdued than usual. Your Honor, Mrs. Whitmore has accepted responsibility for her actions. She has completed voluntary bias training even before sentencing. She has written a letter of apology. Judge Hamilton interrupted. Has this letter been delivered to the victims? Not yet, Your Honor. We wanted to request the court's guidance on whether. I'll address that shortly. Continue. Mrs. Whitmore has no prior criminal history. She has been a contributing member of this community for decades. While her actions were wrong, we believe rehabilitation is more appropriate than punishment in this case. Judge Hamilton looked at Margaret. Mrs. Whitmore, do you wish to make a statement? Margaret stood, her legs shaking. She'd written and rewritten her statement a dozen times. But now, looking at Marcus and James, all her prepared words felt hollow. Your Honor, I don't have adequate words for what I did. She turned to face Marcus directly. Marcus, I hurt you. I scared you. I treated you in a way that no child should ever be treated. I let my fear and my biases override my compassion and my common sense. Her voice was breaking. I want to say I didn't mean it, but that's not entirely true. In that moment, I did mean it. I believed my assumptions more than I believed your truth. And that's something I have to live with. She wiped her eyes. Since this happened, I've been in intensive bias training. I've read books. I've listened to people share their experiences of racism. And I've realized how many times in my life I've made assumptions, held stereotypes, acted on bias without even recognizing it. Margaret looked at James. Dr. Washington, you saved my grandson's life. You showed my family compassion and expertise when we needed it most. And I repaid that by hurting your son. I will never forgive myself for that. She turned back to the judge. Whatever sentence you impose, I deserve it. And I promise to do the work, the real work, of becoming someone who never does this again. She sat down, exhausted. Judge Hamilton was quiet for a long moment, then spoke. I'm going to share something personal, which I rarely do. I have a grandson Marcus's age. He's a bright, curious, joyful child. And I live in fear every day that someone will see him not as that joyful child, but as a threat. That someone will call the police on him for selling lemonade. That a teacher will punish him more harshly for the same behavior as his white classmates. That someone will hurt him and justify it by claiming they felt threatened. The courtroom was silent. Mrs. Whitmore, you embody my worst fears. You saw a child, a polite, frightened child, and decided he was dangerous. You put your hands on him. You tried to weaponize law enforcement against him. And the only reason we're here seeking justice is because that child had resources many children don't have. A parent with means, video evidence, witnesses willing to speak up. Margaret was crying silently. However, I also see before me someone who appears to be grappling with genuine remorse, who is beginning the difficult work of examining her own biases. That's not common. Most people in your position make excuses, minimize their actions, claim they're the real victims. Judge Hamilton looked down at her notes. Here is my sentence. 6 months in county jail, suspended. 5 years probation. 200 hours of community service, to be completed at organizations serving underprivileged youth. Mandatory completion of a year-long bias training program. Restitution to the Washington family for all medical costs, therapy costs, and a punitive amount to be determined after review of impact statements. And a permanent restraining order prohibiting you from contact with Marcus or James Washington. Margaret nodded, accepting the terms. But I'm adding one more condition. Everyone looked up. You will write a comprehensive essay, minimum 5,000 words, detailing what you learned through this process, how your biases developed, and what steps you're taking to address them. This essay will be published in local media outlets as a teaching tool. You will own your actions publicly, not just in this courtroom. Margaret's lawyer started to object, but Margaret stopped him. I'll do it, Your Honor. Judge Hamilton continued. Regarding the letter of apology, that's not my decision to make. Dr. Washington and Marcus get to decide if and when they're ready to receive it. You don't get to force your absolution on them. She looked at James. Dr. Washington, would you like to make a statement? James stood, Marcus beside him holding his hand. Your Honor, I want my son to grow up in a world where his humanity isn't questioned because of his skin color, where he can shop for cereal without fear, where he can exist without someone deciding he's a threat. James looked at Margaret. Mrs. Whitmore, I don't hate you. Hate is too heavy a burden, and I won't carry it. But I also don't forgive you. Not yet, maybe not ever. That's not my burden to relieve either. What I want is for you to use this experience to prevent the next Margaret Whitmore from hurting the next black child. That's the only way any of this has meaning. He squeezed Marcus's hand. My son is brave, resilient, and kind despite what you did to him. And he'll continue to be those things because I'll make sure he knows his worth. But you've taken something from him, a piece of his innocence, his sense of safety. No sentence can give that back. James sat down. Judge Hamilton addressed Marcus. Marcus, do you understand what's happening here today? Marcus nodded, his voice small but clear. Yes, ma'am. The lady is being punished for hurting me. That's right. And I want you to know something. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand that? Yes, ma'am. What happened to you was not your fault. It was about adult failures, adult biases, adult fears. You were and are a child deserving of protection and kindness. Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise. Tears rolled down Marcus's cheeks, but he nodded. Judge Hamilton brought down her gavel. This court is adjourned. The community center buzzed with activity. James stood at the front of a room full of young black boys, ages 8 to 12, all there for his monthly mentorship session. Marcus sat in the front row, occasionally helping demonstrate with the anatomical models James had brought. Okay, James said, holding up a model of a heart. Who can tell me what this part does? Hands shot up. The months since the incident had been transformative in unexpected ways. James had started this mentorship program, teaching underprivileged kids about careers in medicine, about their worth, about navigating a world that might not always see their value. The program had grown from 10 kids to 50. Other professionals had joined, black lawyers, engineers, teachers, artists, all volunteering their time to show these boys what was possible. After the session, a shy boy named Amir approached James. Dr. Washington, can I ask you something? Of course, Amir. Is it true what happened to your son? In the store? James knelt down to Amir's level. Yes, it's true. Were you scared? I was terrified. Not of what might happen to me, but of what had already happened to Marcus. But you didn't show it. In the videos, you looked strong. James smiled gently. Being strong doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what's right anyway. I get scared sometimes. When people look at me weird. When teachers think I'm trouble before I even do anything. I know. And it's okay to be scared. But Amir, you remember what we talked about in group? Amir nodded. Our fear doesn't define us. Our actions do. That's right. And you know what? Every time you walk into a room with your head held high, every time you answer a question in class, every time you stand up for yourself with respect and dignity, you're being strong. Amir smiled. Like Marcus? James looked over at his son, who was laughing with two other boys about something on a tablet. Yeah, just like Marcus. As Amir ran off to join the group, James felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Ramon, the security guard from that day, now volunteering with the program. You're doing good work here, Doc. We all are. These kids need to see men who look like them succeeding, caring, showing up. Speaking of showing up, did you see the news about Margaret Whitmore? James tensed. No. What now? Ramon pulled out his phone, showing James an article. Whitmore completes community service at youth center. The article described Margaret's work with at-risk youth, her completion of bias training, and her published essay about confronting her own racism. The essay had been powerful, raw, honest, uncomfortable. She described her upbringing, her unexamined assumptions, the moment in the store when she'd seen Marcus as a threat instead of a child. She'd detailed her bias training, the books she'd read, the people she'd listened to. And she'd ended with a challenge to other white people. If I could be this blind to my own racism while considering myself a good person, what biases are you carrying? What assumptions are you making? What children are you harming with your fear? The essay had gone viral, sparking thousands of conversations. Have you read it? Ramon asked. Yeah, I read it when it came out. What did you think? James considered his words carefully. I think she's doing the work. Whether it's genuine or performative, only time will tell. But at least she's not making excuses. You think you'll ever let her apologize to Marcus? James watched his son across the room. That's Marcus's decision. When he's ready, if he's ever ready, I'll support it. But she doesn't get to ask for that. She doesn't get to demand his forgiveness to ease her own guilt. Fair enough. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the boys interact, laugh, learn. You know what the crazy thing is? James said quietly. What? I'm grateful. Ramon looked at him in surprise. Grateful? Not for what happened. Never for that. But for what came from it. This program. These kids. The conversations happening in our community and beyond. Marcus learning that his voice matters, that standing up for himself is worth it. James shook his head. I'd trade it all to go back and have that day never happen. To have Marcus's innocence intact. But since I can't do that, I'm going to make damn sure some good comes from it. Crystal Falls Academy was everything James had hoped for. Excellent teachers, strong science program, diverse student body. Marcus had been nervous about starting, worried that everyone would know him as that kid from the videos. But his teacher, Ms. Jennifer Park, had handled it beautifully. On the first day, she'd addressed it head-on. Class, some of you may know that Marcus went through a difficult experience over the summer. If he wants to talk about it, he will. Otherwise, we treat him like any other student, with kindness and respect. Clear? The class had nodded, and Marcus had found his place. Now, 3 months into the school year, he was thriving. His science fair project, a model of the human circulatory system, had won first place in his grade. He'd made friends with a diverse group of kids who liked him for him, not because of the viral videos. He'd also started a kindness club at school, with Ms. Park's support. Every week, kids gathered to discuss ways to stand up against bullying, support each other, and create a more inclusive environment. Today, Marcus was presenting to the club about his experience. So, when the lady grabbed me, I was really scared. But I remembered what my dad taught me. Stay calm, tell the truth, and trust that justice will happen. A girl raised her hand. But what if there are no cameras? What if no one believes you? Marcus thought about this. That's why we have to believe each other. That's why when we see something wrong, we speak up. We can be each other's witnesses. Another boy asked, what if you're scared to speak up? Then you find a trusted adult and tell them. My dad always says being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means doing the right thing even when you are afraid. Ms. Park watched with pride as Marcus led the discussion. The shy, traumatized boy from the summer had found his voice. After the club meeting, Marcus walked with his 2 best friends, Tommy, white, and Jamal, black, to where James was picking him up. Tommy's mom approached James in the pickup line. Dr. Washington, I just wanted to say thank you. James looked surprised. For what? Tommy came home talking about Marcus's presentation, about privilege and bias, and being a good friend. He asked me questions I'd been avoiding. About race, about fairness, about how we treat people. Your son is teaching my son to be better. So thank you. James felt a lump in his throat. Marcus is teaching himself to be better. I'm just supporting him. Well, you're both doing something important. As they drove home, James asked Marcus about his day. It was good. We talked about standing up for each other. And Tommy said his mom is going to take bias training like Mrs. Whitmore did. James glanced at Marcus in the rearview mirror. How do you feel about that? About Mrs. Whitmore doing the training and the community service? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I think it's good that she's trying. But it doesn't make what happened okay. You're absolutely right. Those are 2 separate things. Dad, do you think she'll ever try to apologize to me again? Maybe. Would you want her to? Marcus considered this. I don't know. Part of me wants her to feel bad forever. But part of me thinks if she really changed, that would be better than her just feeling bad. James smiled. You're very wise, you know that? Marcus grinned. I learned from the best. The final scene takes place at a community celebration, 6 months after sentencing. The event, called Justice and Joy, was designed to celebrate positive changes in the community while acknowledging the ongoing work needed. James and Marcus arrived to find the park filled with families, food trucks, live music, and various booths from community organizations. Crystal Falls Market had a booth where David was signing people up for their new customer advisory board focused on inclusive practices. The police department had a booth about their new bias training program for all officers, implemented after the incident. Local schools showcased their updated anti-bias curriculum. And James's mentorship program had a huge booth with dozens of the boys he'd been working with, demonstrating science experiments and talking about their dreams. Marcus ran to join his friends, and James took a moment to survey the scene. Dr. Washington? James turned to find a young black woman, maybe 19 or 20, holding a baby. Yes, I'm Tasha. I was in the store that day. I was the one who spoke up for Marcus. James remembered. the fierce young woman with the baby on her hip who defended his son. I remember. Thank you for that. I wanted to tell you. What you and Marcus did, it changed things for me. I've been teaching my son to keep his head down, don't make waves, don't cause trouble. After seeing Marcus stand up, seeing you fight for him, I realized I was teaching fear instead of strength. James nodded, understanding completely. I'm raising him different now, teaching him his worth, teaching him to speak up. Because of you. That means everything. As Tasha walked away, more people approached. Parents thanking him. Young people sharing how the incident had sparked conversations in their families. Activists discussing the policy changes they'd achieved. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park. On stage, a local pastor was speaking. Today we celebrate progress, but we also acknowledge pain. We honor Marcus Washington's courage and his father's advocacy. We recognize that this incident was not unique. It was simply documented. And we commit to doing better. The crowd applauded. But our work isn't done. Every day, children of color face bias, discrimination, and violence. Every day, parents have conversations that white parents never have to have. Every day, we must choose between silence and courage. He gestured toward James and Marcus. This family chose courage. They showed us that accountability is possible, that change can happen, that justice, while imperfect, is worth fighting for. More applause, louder now. So tonight, we celebrate. We dance, we eat, we connect. We remind ourselves why this work matters. Because it's not just about one incident. It's about building a community where every child, regardless of skin color, can reach for cereal without fear. The crowd laughed and applauded. Music started playing. People began to dance. Marcus ran up to James, pulling his hand. Dad, come on. Everyone's dancing. I don't know if I'm ready for. Too late. Marcus was already dragging him toward the dance floor. James let himself be pulled into the celebration, into the joy, into the moment. He looked around at faces of all colors, all ages, all backgrounds. At people who had come together not just to support his family, but to commit to doing better. And for the first time in 6 months, James felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not the naive hope that everything would be perfect. Not the foolish hope that racism would disappear overnight. But the hard-earned hope that comes from seeing people do the work. From watching his son heal and grow stronger. From knowing that their pain had sparked change, however imperfect. Marcus was dancing with his friends, laughing, free. Still carrying the experience. Still processing the trauma. But also still being 8 years old. Still finding joy. Still believing in his own worth. James joined the dance, his movements awkward, making Marcus laugh harder. And as the music played and the community celebrated, James whispered a promise to the air, to Simone, to himself. I'll keep fighting. For him. For all of them. For as long as it takes. The camera pulls back, showing the park full of people, the joy and determination intermingled, the work ongoing, the hope persistent. Final title card. This story, while fictional, represents experiences faced by countless families. May we all have the courage to see children as children, regardless of their skin color. May we all do the work to examine our biases. May we all choose justice over comfort. And may we never stop fighting for a world where every child can reach for their dreams without fear.